what I want to do right now is show you the front page of the British tabloid The Sun that Blake was referencing. President Trump told the paper last night after his big meetings that he had inserted himself into Brexit, saying he told Prime Minister Theresa May how to do Brexit, but that she, quote, wrecked it, and that if her plan to exit the European Union kept trade, then that would be a problem. That would, quote, kill a bilateral trade deal with the U.S. Today, as you saw, after much international outrage, the president walked back those comments, calling them first fake news. But remember, he gave it to a pretty conservative newspaper that is Rupert Murdoch owned. Rupert Murdoch, of course, is the head of 21st Century Fox, the parent of this network. And President Trump said, whatever the prime minister wants to do with Brexit is OK with me. Let us bring in a Brit, Labour Party member Kate Hoey, who pushed for Brexit during the referendum and is a member of the British Parliament. Welcome. Do tell, how are the British absorbing first the president's interview in The Sun, by the way, as I said, a Rupert Murdoch-owned paper, and now his reversal during which he lavished praise on Prime Minister May?
Well, of course, we've just had this white paper, which is a document produced by the government, going into great detail about how we are going to continue our negotiations. You know, we voted to leave 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, and this has taken all this time to get to the stage where we're now into detailed, or will be in detailed negotiations with the European Union. I think what Trump said in the newspaper, he probably meant, and I think there'd be a lot of people who voted to leave would share his concerns that perhaps if we go down in detail the way that the white paper implies, it would make it extremely difficult to have independent free trade deals with other countries. If we're going to be too tied in still with the 27 other European Union countries. But I think what happened was that after he had had his discussion with the Prime Minister, she obviously, because she told Parliament yesterday, of course, that this wouldn't preclude us making independent trade deals, and I think she's obviously persuaded him perhaps that this is still possible. And of course it's hugely important. I mean, there is no point in leaving the European Union if we don't end up as an independent country able to make those trade deals with the rest of the world, because the European Union is so slow and bureaucratic. They still haven't got a trade deal with India. They took a very long time to get the trade deal with Canada. And that was one of the really important reasons, amongst others, that the British people voted to leave the European Union 2 years ago.
Well, we have a lot of companies and CEOs watching right now, businesses who like to do trade with both the UK and the European Union. Explain to them why that would somehow preclude if, for example, the soft Brexit enabled trade deals with the European Union still, with the United Kingdom, that somehow kills any chance of a bilateral deal with the United States.
Well, what the European Union would be wanting us to do would be to sign up to all their regulations that we already, of course, are similar at the moment, obviously, being a member. But when we leave, we want to be able to have the right to be able to change things if we need to. And if we're not members of the European Union, so we would become a rule taker and still having to comply with everything the European Union said. Now, the big corporations may want that. The multinationals quite like that. But the small businesses, we have so many thousands and thousands of businesses in the United Kingdom that don't do any trade with the European Union, and yet they're tied into all these details of having to do exactly and follow the rules of the European Union. So I think what we want to be able to do is like what the rest of the world does. Not if you're not in the European Union, you operate under World Trade Organization rules, you make your own agreements, you decide the kind of trade deal you want,
and the limitations.
And you agree the regulations. We don't want to be still tied in with the European Union, and Theresa May has said we won't be. We're going to make sure that that doesn't happen, because otherwise we won't be able to reach out and have that really good trade deal with the United States.
Madam, before we go, the president will head after this weekend in Scotland to Helsinki to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who there is blatant evidence, according to the British, that Putin was behind the poisoning with a nerve agent of British nationals. He murdered people on British soil. And, of course, a former Soviet spy who was living in England, Sergei Skripal, but then just A week or two ago, 2 more British nationals came into contact with what was left of this nerve agent and died. What tone do you hope the president takes with Vladimir Putin?
Well, we don't know the details of the very latest incident. There's been even some new developments on that today about having found something in the home of the person who unfortunately died. But I think it was very clear that there was unanimity across the world, really, to ensure that the Russian government realised that we weren't prepared to put up with this kind of thing happening, not just on British soil, but anywhere in the world. And I'm sure, I hope that President Trump will actually make it very clear that we want to get to the bottom of this. And I want to make sure that Putin, who's just had a very successful World Cup going on there, realises that despite that very successful World Cup, and a lot of our British English supporters were out there and had a wonderful time, that we are still not prepared to go back to totally normal relations with Russia until we get to the bottom of what happened.
Well, good luck with that. We hope so too. Kate Hoey, it's wonderful to have you on the program. Thank you so much.